Hello and welcome to Opening Doors podcast. I am very happy to introduce you to my guest today, Joe Gagnon, who lives in both Denver and New York and is currently the CEO of Top Dog, a small to medium business sales enablement platform. Joe's a serial entrepreneur and enterprise executive with 25 plus years of experience as a CXO, which is a chief experience officer. And that person elevates both the customer and the employee experience for a business. And additionally, he is an advisory board member to many startups. Joe is also an endurance athlete, having completed 6 triathlons and over 90 marathons. He is the founder of the High Performance Lifestyle, a philosophy and guide to learn techniques for mental toughness, creative problem solving, leadership, and personal effectiveness. In 2018, after blogging daily for 7 years, he published Living the High Performance Life, an Ordinary Joe's Guide to the Extraordinary. Joe's here today to talk about his experience working with Defy Ventures, providing entrepreneurial training to incarcerated men and women. Welcome to Opening Doors podcast.
Rachel, thanks for having me. Always sort of crazy to listen to the summaries of who we are and what we've done. So thanks for that.
Thing.
Appreciate it very much.
So with all the work you've done, tell our listeners why it's so important to you to do training behind the walls.
Oh my gosh, such a big question. You know, it's always easy to sort of think about things and look backwards rather than when we're going through it. But if I was to say what the foundation was when I was growing up, my dad was a social worker in the New York City schools. He worked at Lincoln Hall, which was a facility for kids who got in trouble a long time ago. My mom worked in the Child Protective Agency, trying to help children who were not being treated properly by families. And little did I know that this was somewhat of a foundation, even though I became a tech guy and software related. I always had this sort of caring for people perspective deep in my heart. You know, my family, my wife and kids, you know, we all sort of like to give back. And so when I got introduced to, you know, and of course, I never had any deep personal connection with the prison system. But I did have through when I was the president of Penn Foster, which was an online school, a program where we tried to get kids to graduate from high school because we have about 1 million people a year who drop out of high school. And without a high school degree, it's hard to get a job. Sadly, one of the places you end up is in prison because you have no other means to take care of yourself. And so I started to see the issues that we had foundationally within this country where we weren't setting people up for success and we were sort of trapping them into an environment of limited choice. Program was fantastic. We showed that we could use online education to graduate. People who had dropped out 3 or 4 times, you know, 38% of them went on to college. 98% of them graduated, got jobs. And then, you know, back into the software world I worked. And then when I met Andrew, who was the CEO of Defy Ventures for the past 7 years, and was asked to step in actually about almost a year ago into a pitch fest that was going on in New York City where post-incarcerated people were pitching their business ideas. I was like struck by, oh my gosh, I could bring sort of my care for people and my business experience to help people, you know, get a better chance at sort of what should happen next. Because clearly, as we know, Rachel, that, you know, the first time into prison may not be the last. The first time there changes how everyone thinks about you. There's just so much that is somewhat unconscionable, and we got to do something about it. And so, you know, I can keep going on and on, but I'll stop because there's probably lots of questions you want to ask. But that first step was, then going to visit some of the prisons and getting involved in an advisory capacity and also helping out. And now I'm excited to dig deeper into sort of this opportunity to
And
help people.
we both know that when people come out of prison, um, they've got a conviction, they've got a record, and they're trying to look for work, that it's a big hindrance, it's a big problem. Can you talk a little bit about that, the importance of entrepreneurial training to improve people's chances upon release?
Yeah, I think the parallel is really interesting when we were doing the Penn Foster work, that high school diploma with a sort of vocational certificate was more powerful to get employment because you showed to an employer that you were sort of prepared to work. So it could have been a carpenter, a plumber, it could be an auto mechanic, whatever that certificate. And actually, the Department of Labor supports this in the country. So similarly, if you leave prison just with, sort of your, intention to be employed again, you might not be skilled properly to set yourself up for success. And, what we're saying through the Defy Ventures program is that during a 10-month program, you can build the basic skills to think about running a business. Now, you don't have to just be an entrepreneur. You could use it as skills to get employed. And these are basic skills, everything from understanding, finance and businesses and pricing and product and customers and differentiation. It's a foundation of what we don't really learn on our day-to-day basis. And you then would have, the opportunity to show someone who's going to employ you or start your own business that indeed you are skilled enough to go do something more. So if we really want people to reenter society in a productive way and not have the recidivism rate that we have, then we're going to need to invest in people both while they're incarcerated and post-incarceration to support them. There, maybe this is sort of a little bit silly, but, I thought sort of if you did something bad and you paid your time, then you were sort of done. Like, you did, you went and you come back. But no, really, it's not that way at all. These are lost souls, and society needs to do more to think about this reentry back into, a regular life, if that's ever possible. And we can do that with some of the programs Defy is doing and other ways of doing that. But we can't just let it sort of be, with no support. Then we know what the answer is. They're
Absolutely.
End up back in prison.
And so it sounds like Defy's curriculum does a little bit around people skills. Do you do a little bit of work around decision making and things like that?
Yeah, it's actually, sort of as much as anything that's a weekly program can be complete, it is 10 months. And this is a real commitment. And remember, well, I couldn't speak to what resources everyone has in every prison, but the ones I've visited that are maximum security, they don't have internet access, which is problematic, but they have a pencil and paper and they do the work. And so this skill building is really essential. And over a 10-month period and in a weekly fashion and in a community of people, you start to build those different skills, not just the business-like skills, but the thinking skills, the how to show up. And I feel that so far in the programs that I've visited that these are a group of people who both have remorse for what they did and also believe they have to be different and want to be different going forward. And so, yes, they are starting off with maybe even in some sense better skills than other people because a lot of people don't go through a 10-month entrepreneurial program. What's also interesting, Rachel, this only costs $2,000 per incarcerated person to put them through this program. This is a modest investment to get someone prepared. It's all private money, all through donations, 503c that Defy is. But wow, what an impact this is making for that modest investment.
Do you know some statistics on that? Do you have? And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I can look that
Well, what
up.
we know is that the recidivism rate is only 10% on anyone who
Wow.
goes to the Defy Ventures program.
That
That's the most important
that's huge.
statistic that any
Yeah,
of
that's
us can think
huge.
about.
So, yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think a lot of it is mindset and helping the people that are incarcerated think of
Mm.
themselves in a different way. And I think being able to relate to
Yes.
successful business people that are teaching them helps them see this could be possible for me too.
You know, the saying, hope springs eternal. I'm not sure that there's a lot of people on the outside who understand that. But boy, if you're on the inside working on this program, and I've worked with people who have a life sentence and they're still working on their entrepreneurial idea and their business plan. This is a group of people who realize that, you know, for the time where we're here, all of us, mistake or not, that we have to put our best effort into what we're going to become, and that we have to show up differently. Look, we've all made mistakes. Now, yes, some of them are rather severe, but we have a system that says you sort of, you know, pay for that mistake. But then the rest of our lives, we should be able to all have an equal opportunity. Now, what's crazy is that entrepreneurship doesn't require permission by anyone. You can go start whatever company you want. To get a job, you need permission from some person who's judging you based on your record, which is, you know, I guess that's up to them, but it is slightly unfair, especially if you have, you know, put in the effort. And imagine if you were convicted of something, you serve your time, and you put your time into a Defy Ventures program, and you've made this skill set jump, and you're really, you know, progressed in your life, and then someone won't give you a job because of something you did, but you paid for and you worked to make yourself better.
There's nothing more unfair.
You know.
That's a lot of why I'm doing this podcast, because once you've paid that debt, once you've been incarcerated and served your time, there needs to be an allowance to so that you can come back and rejoin society. And so laws around hiring, perceptions need to change. I mean, clearly there are victims to crimes, but the system is supposed to be that you pay your debt to society. And what we're doing in the modern system is that debt becomes a lifetime.
Yeah, I just don't know that if that's what we want it to be, then once you go to prison, you should be there the rest of your life. By the way, you know, I know you probably know this data better than me, but it's something like, you know, in 1960, we had a $2 billion prison system in the United States, and now it's near on a $100 billion prison system. We're not fixing the problem. It's not like more people are committing. Actually, crimes are down. We're just built a commercial system that, to its benefit, needs people in there. And at $100,000 per person to put them up for a year, imagine if we could invest. Now, there's probably some small percentage, sadly, of people who probably need to be segregated from society. Small percentage, but not a large percentage. And there's people who, you know, everyone knows this, you know, you just didn't get caught for the mistake you made, right? And so I'm not saying that justifies anything, but if we run a system, it should work the way it's supposed to work. And that means you pay your time, and now you come out and you should give yourself some hope. Now, this is why what's so interesting about what Defy is doing, interestingly, as go into next year, is to think about, can the prison system itself up level? Can we educate some of the guards and the people working in the prison system so they understand better? Maybe they're more entrepreneurial. Maybe they can have a future for themselves because it's a tough job. Maybe we can create this cooperative environment. I mean, there is, I've been in some pretty tough situations, but there's nothing what it would feel like when you spend a whole day with people in a prison and you see that, you know, for an hour, everyone's positive and energized and working on these business plans. And then the next thing you know, you hear an announcement from one of the officers, you know, almost like everyone duck down kind of feeling, you know. There's a movie, 26.2. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's about San Quentin and these guys who run a marathon around the prison area. And every once in a while they keep getting these announcements, which is don't move, and everyone has to stop in place. And you're like, oh yeah, you're reminded that's where you are, because you think for a minute, this is no different than any other pitch fest that I've been to. And we have a graduation, and I was able to give the keynote at one of the events. And you start to say, maybe this is more normal than crazy. But then once you leave, there's no contact ever again with any of the inmates, and who knows what'll ever happen. Seems, I don't know,
No,
unacceptable to me.
It is pretty shocking. I spoke with someone who got their entire degree while they were in solitary confinement. The way the system is currently structured, once someone reenters from prison, they're often on parole. Then they're, part of their conditions of parole is that they need to find a job. And then they're often unable to do that because they have a record. So it's not giving a chance to, in some ways, turning back to crime makes sense. It's awful, but
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a familiarity. It's a way to take care of yourself. We're survivors, if nothing else, and we might have to make some bad choices to survive because that's all we can do. It's almost in everyone's right to try and figure out how to survive. We have some laws that reconcile a lot of that, but it goes back to this saying, or I might have a quote from Teddy Roosevelt, the purpose of government is to serve the needs of the people. And I think in society, it can't be only about personal success. We have to have community success. And to have community success, we have to have shared values and sort of cultural norms that we support people to achieve. And if they sort of get a little bit off track, then we bring them back to the center, which is good for all of us. There's no reason, the aberrations don't help anyone. And so when our systems don't work, there isn't any safety net, back to the high school thing. If we have 1 million kids dropping out of high school a year, and it's more in certain communities, of course, Greenwich, Connecticut is not a problem. Polk County, Florida is a problem. Parts of Detroit are a problem, but, Palo Alto is not. And so we got to start focusing on the places where we could help, not the places that don't need any help. And, a job is at least for the foreseeable future is the way that we sort of all show up. We don't have universal basic income. And, how else do you take care of yourself? Right. So, and, we know that, being on the ranks of Medicaid and for healthcare, and so many elements of this are like, okay, we can't just have a lot for a few and nothing for many, and then leave them to try and figure it out. Like, who's to blame then? Like, you can't starve people and expect them not to try and feed themselves. So I think it is. I don't think it's complicated at all. I think we have to have an integrated system where we're measuring our success based on how many people have productive lives, because that's collectively better for all of us. And we got to do some work on that. In the interim, of course, what we do with Defy and others in incarceration and post-incarceration is a way to sort of fix a little bit of a mess we're creating. It's only
right. And so programs like Defy, and Defy is currently in about 5 or 6 different states, and there's similar programs around the country that are great. Yeah. But I think the issue, and I think you hit the nail on the head, is what are we doing in the schools to help people realize before they start having criminal activity that there are other options. So somewhere in the education system, it's important to probably at a younger age to start talking about opportunity.
Yeah, totally agree. when, it was really a formative experience for me, the Penn Foster thing, because it was a for-profit school, started in the 1890s as a correspondence school. It developed into the high school and then had vocational programs. It had a 2-year associate's degree and a few 4-year degrees. And a lot of things we learned along the way, back to this idea that, education is a gift for life. The only reason to get educated is to get a job. But the way that we're teaching is the Carnegie method, which is from the 1890s. The Carnegie method was a seat time method, and it was about subjects, not competencies. And we live in a world where competencies matter, not subjects. Trigonometry is relatively ineffective for what we need to be able to do to get a job. And so there's an idea that we will get to a world where it's project-based learning that gets critical thinking and literacy as the enablers of a good life in the hands of people, so you can graduate having done 150 projects from high school. By the way, high school shouldn't be 4 years, doesn't need to be 4 years. It's an artifact. All of these are artifacts of a farming and an industrial economy. And so foundationally, like if we want to really fix this problem, we go back earlier in the system, early childhood development, the Head Start program. My dad worked on it in 1965. Head Start, build a foundation when children don't have good family structure. So we then solidify people earlier in their lives. Then we get them educated. And anyone who thinks that, online learning doesn't work just because of the pandemic doesn't know what they're talking about. That was a circumstance and a bad design. That is not to indict learning, which can happen anyway in a classroom, on a computer, as long as we're measuring competencies, which is something you can do, not only a subject and a topic. And so as we move on and give people tools like AI, but we have to start from the foundation and build this foundation, because children like to work. I mean, if you go to Japan and you see what happens in the elementary schools in Japan, they're cleaning the rooms, they're making sure everything works well, they're learning the disciplines of life. If you don't teach the disciplines of life and get educated, it is harder. This isn't like intellectually a hard problem, because actually if you go to the highly affluent, let's call it the top 10%, not even the top 2%, they get all of this, Rachel. And where do they end up? They end up successful and they're employed. Well, maybe they're higher divorce rates. I don't know. But, at the end of the day, we have to be committed to this. Now, the problem is, why are we not committed to this? Because the concentration of wealth doesn't really have to worry about people who live below the poverty level, about the issues if you're at the median income, about the breakdown of the family unit, about the way that inner city schools are working. They don't have to worry about any of that because they got it locked in and they have a concentration. So therefore, we're sort of shoving into the wind, trying to think about how do we take care of people. And we're going to have to, as society, think about the depth of this. Now, imagine if we fix this, we would have 40 million, productive people in this country. We would really even be like 50% more productive than we are today.
Yeah,
So
no, it's
So
somehow the private prison system has been allowed to take over and corrupt really the states' abilities to really serve their citizens, because the private prison system needs prisoners to keep feeding itself. And if they keep giving big donations to politicians, well, why would politicians want to change rules around who goes to jail and for how long? So it is unfortunately a really deep systemic problem. But I agree. If there are Head Start programs and programs within schools that actually teach about finances at a young age, that teach parenting, that teach relationships, how to get along, how to make good decisions, that is much more important than trigonometry. For some people, trigonometry is really important, but for 95% of us, it's much more important to have interpersonal skills.
We're going to have to revise over the next 5 to 10 years how we think about learning and education. I agree with you that the commercialization of the prison system created a set of perverse incentives that are, the reason why. Hey, look, if you thought about the prisoner, the incarcerated person, as a customer, you want them coming back. You want someone coming back to your department store because you want repeat customers. They're less expensive. And then they actually know how the system works. And so it's a little bit sad. I don't know, not to completely indict anyone, but it can't be where we wanted to end up because it seems unconscionable that especially when we could help people. Now back to, look, the last prison I went to was 2,000 people. Maybe there's hundreds that are problematic, truly. But there's at least 1,000 who aren't, who need a pathway, who actually showed me over and over again their willingness. Oh my gosh, in the final presentations that people make in these events, you sometimes think, wow, they're better than my employees. Let's not indict them because they were in prison, that they're not smart or earnest, hardworking, insightful. I mean, it's quite remarkable. You'd have to go to believe it, because otherwise you think, they just deserve to be there. Well, yeah, maybe, maybe not.
Thank you, Joe, for giving listeners a lot to think about. The idea of the high performance life definitely includes giving back, and I appreciate that as such a high performer that you are showing what that looks like.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Rachel. I think I would just leave it this way. When I put the subtitle on my book, when I said from ordinary to extraordinary, I think we all start off the same, which is pretty ordinary. Much of our choice to become extraordinary is the choices we make in the life that we live, and some of that enabled by what we've been talking about for a while: family, education, opportunity, community, and otherwise. But not everyone has an equal start, but we all have an equal place on this earth. And whether we have a spirituality to us or not, we still are all equal participants, and we all should have the same opportunities and treat each other with respect and dignity and support each other. And if someone didn't get the great start, then we should be there to help them. And I'm just glad that I'm able to do that in some small way. If we all did it in some small way, whatever it is, make a donation. It's not just to Defy, it's to any cause. If you can't do it with time yourself, take a look around. There are people who are putting their lives out there to help others, and we all should be helping others. And if you're really selfish, this will still help you, because we'll be a much more productive society, if everyone is gainfully employed and taking care of each other. So thanks for doing the podcast, Rachel. I really appreciate being on.
Thank you, Joe. And I will put some links in the show notes so that people know where to find you, and keep on keeping on. Thank you.
Yeah, we will be doing that. Thank you.